All right. Well, welcome to this edition of Change Notice. We're really excited to have great guests in the hardware integrity space join us today. So we have Dr. Maik Duwensee. We'll be discussing the future of hardware integrity in automotive fleets, encompassing hardware testing, reliability, data analysis, trying to make sure that every issue that could impact any vehicle in a fleet is solved and traceable at every touch point. So really excited about that. Maik himself is an engineering visionary with 10 plus years experience in product development for Uber and Jump, Tesla, Apple, and HGST, leading mass production products enhancing quality, manufacturability, safety, cost, and reliability. Maik is renowned for his strategic mindset and is adept at guiding design decisions impacting specification requirements, collaborating on material and process development, and defining and sustaining QA processes and controls. So that'll be like a first piece. And maybe as a first starting question, I would love to hear from you, Maik, a little bit more about who you are, like in 2 minutes, who you are, what was the first thing you took apart, and what are you building now?
Cool, thank you. And by the way, I've never gotten that kind of introduction. And the last time someone called me doctor was right after graduation when I gave a speech at the local high school in East Germany. It never happened before in between. So
I could have asked you before how you like to be introduced. So I apologize for not confirming the superlative.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We'll 5 hard years in San Diego. But thank you. Who am I? So I grew up in totally opposite. It's a story I like to tell. I grew up in East Germany, the wall was still up and stuff. And we basically had to take everything apart to just keep it going. You had to, for instance, if you had a car, you had to wait 12 years for it if you wanted one. So you had a bicycle. There were only 5 or 6 bicycles per year sold in that little city. So we had to keep fixing it. And I learned all that stuff from my grandfather. We never tossed things. We make wheel bearings out of old wheel bearings, It sounds like a good old days here, but this is how I started getting into fixing things and sometimes breaking them to see how they don't work. And from there, I made it to San Diego for grad school. Tough to leave San Diego, but I found a job here in the Bay Area. Went to all the companies that you just envisioned. I ended up in reliability, not so much that it is the most hot and sexiest topics in engineering, right? We're basically telling parents that their kids are not as good in art or not as good in mathematics by breaking their products, where the products are the kids. So it's maybe not, but how I got into it, my first gig out of grad school was kind of very established industry, the hard drive industry, where everything is around reliability. And that is just engraved in the entire and ingrained in the entire development process. Every engineer, that's the only thing that counts besides performance. And then I got an offer moving to Apple, to the reliability team, where basically 80% of the people working in reliability came from the hard drive industry. So that was the connection. And from there, the world is much more open. iPhone, then we met during the first watch in good old Pegatron. Then from there, I went to the Secret Titan project for a little bit. That word I guess I'm allowed to use now. It's all over the press. Then 3 years at Tesla. Professionally, pretty cool years, I have to say. Super intense, nonstop. But the attitude was getting things done. I was in charge of noise, vibration, harshness, and that goes from very simple problems that people forget to screws in the doors and they rattle. So I have to hold the line to introduce like a process that is happening less likely. To more challenging problem, wind noise, when the gap and the flash of all these glass surfaces don't match up. And when you go over 65 miles, it sounds like Hurricane Katrina, right? And but it's pretty intense. I caught the attention of the almighty Elon, who made me put me in charge of the entire group with one single email. Was tough though. The manager we had then, he was really good. We all liked him. So, but I survived this for 6 months. Then one of the former Tesla executives called me into Uber, and then COVID hit, and now I'm at Cruise, where I'm back into real reliability. The main drive there was for me is it is not a consumer product. We actually have to suffer with everything we're gonna let slip through. And that were my 2 minutes. happy to discuss more if people are interested.
Awesome. Yeah. And so for folks in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. If you're not familiar with Change Notice, we do a kind of a couple of kind of pre questions here in a recorded chat, and then we'll turn off the video and have a off the record Q&A. So if you've got your off the record questions, I'm sure Mike is excited to answer those too. Okay, so what can you share about some of the exciting things you're building at Cruise today? Like what that you're involved in and part of?
So what I like is, assuming everyone knows what Cruise is doing, the ultimate goal is we creating a fleet of robot taxis that drive people around, starting in San Francisco and then, hopefully taking on the world. We are building the vehicles themselves, and the ultimate goal is also maintaining that all those vehicles. So that was the attractive part for me, going back into reliability, building the fleet product. We have GM as a partner who do the base vehicle, and my group basically has to okay, if you want so, every component that is part of the autonomous vehicle system. So every sensor, every compute, every network switch. I also wish sometimes we are at the low components, the connectors and the cables, because they do break, that we have a little bit of a say in this one. That is currently not there yet. We're working on this one. But imagine every AV component that is on a self-driving car is going through my group. That I think sums it up pretty nicely. We have to work with our partners, GM, Honda, but that's basically what we do.
Okay, maybe as kind of an introduction question, I know like you, and actually it's even right in your title, is the use of the kind of phrase hardware integrity. And we've also talked about reliability. Can you describe like the difference between those terms? And when talking about hardware integrity, like what is the kind of key most important part about that as a field?
So I was hired just to actually, and that's most likely why we're biasing back to reliability. When I started, it was just a reliability group that I was honored to be put in charge on. But coming to think of it, we have to reconsider this entire concept of reliability. First of all, we own the fleet and we own all the data, and all these AVs traditionally, they pop out so much data you can't even pay Google enough or Amazon for storage space. So we only keep them for some time. But this entire fleet becomes an ongoing reliability experiment. Right? I can develop extremely good models to predict failures, maybe even optimize the fleet. What happens if the cars in Miami seem to wear out earlier, but we can still get 5 years out of Chicago? Yeah, we have to put them on a train. Just, the connection where all this flows together, and the total access to almost every kind of data point that you want, that you don't have with Apple and consumer products, right? Because there's secrecy and privacy and all these kind of things. But now we do have them. That was very attractive for me, and actually how we met, right? I'd also like to close the loop with what happens on the line. Can I improve on future development and nail it all down and have the full picture? So we merged. What started at reliability is now 4 columns, and the team itself came actually up with the word hardware integrity. So power to the people. They came to me and then, like, can we rename ourselves? Yeah, sure. So it's 1 column is reliability. This is a traditional reliability. People do test plans and how long you cook, how often you drop, and all that kind of stuff. Then we have our test engineers to talk to the units, help us with the test execution, instrumenting units to do all kinds of fancy experiments. Then we have the prototype engineering, not just machine shops. Building the first prototypes happens also in hardware integrity. And then we have the people that have the most expensive tools is the failure analysis with all the fancy SEM and X-ray machine and having the Superman vision and looking into things and finding screws that we don't find without a system like yours, but we find them after the fact just with X-ray. So having this complete thing of I try to avoid the word quality here, but try to have a full understanding of the product in a larger scale and identify family of problems for some part of the product in different geographies and stress zones. That is cool. That's what I like about it.
Awesome. So can you share then a hardware integrity war story with us? Because I think that's where, that's where we all do a lot of our learning. And so can you share, is there a story that you can share with us about?
I have to put it in general as a general aspect, right? But, I'm pretty sure we all have a product that is generally all electronics here in the Bay Area, whether it's a compute unit, and then you put them, they work off the line, the line is up, we get decent yield, so let's start testing. And during the testing is the first time you stress it a little bit out of the comfort zone, out of the operating at room temperature, and everything starts overheating and not necessarily blowing up. And then you keep digging in and you keep digging in and you throw all these expensive experiments, and you found that the vendor put components on that are not automotive graded, right? Because there is a chip shortage and they just thought we can do it. But it took 3 months to figure that one out and to negotiate the correction. And then you have the timeline slipping, people going crazy. I'm pretty sure everyone here had that experience. But also part of integrity, we introduced something here is okay to rel or okay to test. Sounds a little bit like a DMV, but no, it's a checklist that it's a global checklist, but we tailor it to the product need or where we are in the development process. And if that checklist hasn't been checked off, this will be properly, documented. We will introduce that to people and say, hey, this is a remaining risk. Do you want the program then decides, do you want to go on or not? Otherwise we slip, right? And so that is also part of hardware integrity, because the checklist contains items of test engineering, of quality, of supply chain, to just avoid these features. We will never get rid of them. It's human. It's in human nature to screw up. But I want to make it more and more complicated to screw up.
Yeah, that it's always very frustrating. That's not the first time that I've heard the story about the chips got swapped out for something else that was not as specified, that had then some problem. Certainly heard that one before. And certainly in my own experience, it's always frustrating when somebody knows there's a problem and then they kind of let you spend months looking for it, but they know it's there and they're kind of oh, maybe they won't find it. That's happened to me personally multiple times, where one team knows oh, this is probably a problem, but maybe it won't be. And they kind of put it on a shelf and kind of forget about it. And then suddenly you're in daily mode with executives on why do we have bubbles in our displays? And why are our displays going black? And we're not shipping the product as a result. And it's oh yeah, there was that report from 4 months ago that said that our adhesives create fluorine gas that eats our copper traces. Maybe we should have paid attention to that report. It can be really frustrating. And a lot of this stuff takes a lot of time to do the testing. It's not overnight that you have a problem. A lot of this stuff, it's hours and many, many, many hours of heating and jostling and whatever to be able to discover these issues.
That's right, and often combined with the panic that is associated with it, right? You're not calming down and saying, so what goes wrong, right? No, yeah. Let's just do something. Let's just put something in test, and 3 weeks later, it was not really worth it. And,
yeah, or the millions of. I guess I'm kind of curious, as we're kind of going off our list here, but I'm kind of curious, in consumer electronics, where the devices themselves, cost somewhere between $70 and $400 to the company during the development stage. You can create large configurations of units to run through reliability to get reasonable sample sizes. And there's certainly arguments for and against how big certain sample sizes should be. At Apple, configurations could be 30 units and we'd run those through a waterfall or whatever. Obviously, in cars, 30 units of every config is probably not a reasonable reliability allocation. How does do you do just a lot more module testing, or how does it translate, I guess, between from the consumer electronic world into the automotive world? in terms of reliability quantities, or what is considered validated from a reliability perspective?
So we try to do as much as module testing, early testing. If they swap the components of out on us, that backfires a little bit. But we try. But even those components, just because the numbers are so low, I mean, if Apple goes to a vendor and they want to ask 1,000 samples, the vendor says yes, right? Cruise hasn't done that power yet, so we have to do. There's a lot of simulation. There is a little bit institutional knowledge, right? In my group, just the test engineers combined have 250 years of experience. The reliabilities have 100, where 25 are on a single person. And so these guys have been around the block. They suffer a little bit with the other end. That's the startup, young, dynamic, quick. While let's look at it first. So that's the struggle I have to keep everyone happy. But yeah, the ultimate goal for these, where you don't have all the sample sizes you wish you have, and then also keep in mind what we do is big, right? You can't test 100. You don't have as many like chambers, or you can't drop 5,000 lidars or whatever. That was extreme, but you cannot just do that. And the sample costs are also outrageous. They are tens of thousands of dollars sometimes. So there's always a little bit tea leaf reading left over in the end. So we use tools that everyone is using, this DFMEA, these panic tools, right? They can be very powerful, useful, and I'm sure you have been, or everyone in this audience have been sitting through DFMEA meetings where everyone is just all the things that go wrong. You have, it plays into the human and the negative type of thinking. Everything that can go wrong is being categorized. We should also follow up on all of them, and that's where the power of that tools usually goes away if we don't do it. But things like that are more important for us here, where we have limited sample size and really tight schedules, as much as you and I use from Apple and stuff.
Is there any non-regulatory required, like I'm thinking about like crash testing, for example, as like a regulatory required testing? Is there any non-regulatory system level testing that's done that the like car makers do on their own, where they have their own like suite of tests, in the same way like phones have system reliability testing? We're going to do drops, we're going to do chambers, we're going to do, like, I imagine there's all sorts of things with water and stuff like that that might not be part of like regulatory safety from the government. But I'm just kind of curious, like, how many tests are there on that? Is it like 10 core things, or is there like 100 tests, like an order of magnitude of just system level for this kind of testing in automotive?
I don't know the number, but yes, there is full car level testing. Usually, you might have heard the expression proving grounds. Every big company has one. Elon doesn't have one, but the GM one I visited for 3 or 4 weeks ago, it is massive. It is awesome. I visited a couple in England, one in England called Myra. And so what you find is basically all sorts of streets with potholes, streets with Belgium couple, like long, very well maintained, like big water-filled basins you can drive through, or like something that simulates rain. And then you have people that put miles on the car on high speed, various speeds. And how often at full velocity and how often at not so high speed, that is part of the whole reliability test development, acceleration, and all that kind of stuff. But the tests on those early prototypes, they last weeks to months, right?
Yeah.
There's EMC testing, most likely something you're familiar with, right? Even if you pass on component level, if you stitch them all together, that thing might radiate stuff, right? So, and then where is it? So there's a lot of feedback loop, very intense times, and a lot of copper tape wrapped around things.
What surprised you most about the different philosophies around reliability in kind of the three big logo companies you've been at? Apple obviously has, like a big kind of projection of reliability. Tesla, super like interesting one as an example due to the intensity of just that organization in general. And now at Cruise, like, kind of what surprised you about those different philosophies that maybe reliability professionals might be able to appreciate?
everyone likes to use the word reliability. Everyone does it. PD at Apple does it. Every marketing institution does it. And even Tesla folks said, oh, yeah, super reliable because all we have is a battery and a motor and a bunch of software. And that's really true. It is an inherently simple system. It should last longer. But, you know, it's man-made, so things happen. What are the difference? Apple is taken seriously. If I found something, it was taken seriously, right? And it was very clear what needs to happen to make it go away. And there was no, I like those phases. I call them task force mode because I didn't have to have meetings to get things done, right? So wonderful, and they live it. And by the way, the iPhone for me, and I'm biased, is the best phone out there, right? And when I always say we should build the cruise cars like iPhone because if we have them, we do them, we build them, we send them out in the world, they create revenue, and that's all we ever do to them. Maybe we put new tires on it. So Apple takes it seriously, and they're not shying away from dropping features if it might affect the negative image of making solid products. So that is, I like it, pretty cool. Then at Tesla, it was a little bit of a different approach because they had to become Apple of automotive first to then. So, and that was just get it out, we fix it later, we fix it later. And initially there was not a big appetite for reliability testing. I know that the team had a huge turnaround. At some point, I think there were 10 or 15 people leaving at once, if I remember correctly. But then once they grow up, Model 3 ships at whatever, 500,000 a year, then these agencies like JD Power and Associates make one comment, and that suddenly has power. So now reliability and quality is a real thing over there. Cool. They also have it easy now because there are fewer and fewer moving parts. You know, it's all going down to thing. And then here at Cruise, interesting that you asked, we have both sides. We have the startup Cruise and we have GM that are all about, you know, that kind of stuff. So there is friction occasionally of how often we should do something, and we said, it's gonna work, let's do it. So the philosophy is Apple, hardcore, Tesla initially, let's get it going, figure that one out later. And now here we have the, yes, we do it now, and we have a tight schedule aspect of both of them. So
now you just have to do both.
yeah. And but it's also the beauty. What we find right now is in reliability testing, it take a couple of weeks and you can define, hey, if I'm here, I'm 60% confident or have this kind of level of reliability. And then you can make a risk decision. But the beauty, to my initial point, if I ship it to the field, or I know there's a remaining risk, I just don't hold the program, watch the field. If it becomes an issue, I had about 3 or 4 weeks to have a fix that hopefully is applicable on the fly. So you can prepare yourself for the afterlife, for the real life already, right? So
it is true that I think, well, it's true that owners of cars expect that there's going to be ongoing maintenance associated with their vehicle, whereas owners of phones don't really expect there to be ongoing maintenance involved with their phone beyond like the software updates. So it's true that there is kind of like a, you can never get like from the consumer electronic perspective, like you can't hot fix hardware, like you can't ship a patch. But like in automotive, you can actually ship a patch in the physical space because people come in for maintenance and you can do maintenance and you have an opportunity you don't have like when you're building a phone. It's very interesting. So I guess like we probably have a mixed audience between folks from consumer electronics kind of interested in automotive and folks from automotive interested in consumer electronics. And so we'll do the question both ways, but for the audience, for those in the audience who are in consumer electronics, what's something tactical from automotive reliability that you think could be put into practice right away, like that they could learn from the automotive approach to reliability?
That's a tough one. Honestly, don't know. Don't know. Automotive is not that we skip things, right? It's 100 years old, whatever industry, consumer. Most of them we're talking right now, not. I prefer the traditional consumer one. Is just more dynamic because the products are new. All these processes like DFMEA, they actually mean more there than just just making another Silverado, and I don't mean it in a degrading way. So if I tell you what is traditional automotive, there are generally specs that have been established over decades of time that you need to pass. And those specs don't always apply to the consumer product. So that's why I'm most likely struggling with that answer.
Okay, what about in the other direction? What could automotive learn from consumer electronics approach that you've brought as you've come into these companies that you've been able to leverage your Apple experience?
What I noticed with at Apple, just because it's a common theme in the Valley, is we take it serious. We have a subcomponent level. You brought on the displays. I was on the force touch sensor. There is sub and sub module, and for each component itself, reliability was almost the exhausting. You cook them, you take them, you put them in gasoline or whatever you think might come out of the DFMA, what you should need, and then you build up the product, and you have the same rigor on the product. Right, so it is very, very dynamic, each of the subcomponents. Now dealing with the OEMs, and I don't think that Audi, Mercedes, or in anything different, a lot of the stuff that is required from the OEMs is to just show that the entire display setup with the cables hanging out fulfills a set of specs that they defined. The automotive doesn't care what happens inside. That is going to be pushed to the vendor. So we're facing this a little bit because there's a lot of stuff. There is no history on AV components in large scale automotive applications, right? So I appreciate if the automotive guys would understand that we also have to first develop the intelligence from inside, right? Like what goes into the compute, the GPUs. There are not that many automotive grade GPUs that you can just buy. Elon made his own, right? I'm pretty sure Waymo does their own, or I know. But NVIDIA is they do GPUs, but most of the stuff is for like data centers and all the cool AI.
Mining.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So we're having the components here that don't lend themselves for automotive, but we have to put them into an automotive product. And then on the automotive side is this kind of often perceived rigid, you have to pass this. It doesn't make sense. If I have to pass it, it is not going to happen, right? So these two worlds collide, automotive and consumer. And ultimately, consumer is like a little bit young and dynamic, while the traditional OEMs is just like, oh, calm down. So they have to meet.
Okay. How would you define best practice for the use of reliability data today? And how do you think that'll change in the next 5 to 10 years?
First of all, we shouldn't throw the data away, and ever. So that also requires that we have all these smart people that are out there, the data scientists, data analysts, structure the data for us in a proper way, that we can easily access them later. If I have to go back to Lotus 123 or Excel, whatever, on 311 to open a file, no, data has to be kept fresh and maintenance and easy to access. So that if I have a field issue on a large scale, I almost want to push a button and it gets me the whole history of everything that is in that product.
Digital thread.
I want to go down to all the serial numbers that had similar symptoms that happened on Monday, May 1st, on the line at whatever company, right? And because the data is on the computer and hopefully fresh like that, that is something that is most likely oversimplified, easily done. But it gives you all the answers. Should be easily done. It gives you all the answers that you have or that you need in the very first meeting with very nervous executives that are actually ready to go golfing, but now we screwed with that one, right? And having this tickle down here, this is all the data, all excluded, the problem is here. We don't know what it is, but it is here, and here's the proof. And that, I think, needs to change. Especially for fleet products that we are.
What needs to change is that the data itself needs to be collected and organized with a thought towards the future and coming back to that data.
It's a chicken and an egg problem. Why do you need it?
Not done today necessarily.
Yeah. Why do you need it? Why do you need it? I don't know, but my gut feeling tells me I might, right? And it's a chicken and an egg because even storing data costs money. So I can't justify it based on pencil pushing and making financial Excel cells suddenly be green. No, they're going to be red. That is some overhead cost.
Yep.
And setting it all up, even the data that you guys have, having access to it or having it organized in a way, not just saying, oh yeah, I stored it somewhere. There is a CSV file or a JSON
There's a
file
folder.
somewhere. Yeah, no one will ever touch that. There is a reality in the Silicon Valley. People cycle through companies, right? It's not that I was shy of it, right? So it has to be there. It's part that for me is going to be part of a company's secret sauce of how it handles, because that will set it apart in crisis mode. The crises will be there. You can quantify the crisis and you can solve the crisis. And that ultimately will be, these are good guys, I can rely on them. That's what I really believe in.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like you're also saying that it's like a pretty easy place to start. Like, just think ahead a little bit about how you're going to format the data so that it's kind of future-proofed a little bit to be useful and searchable and findable and leverageable.
Right.
Totally agree about the point that like having data in a filing cabinet that's not having data.
Yeah.
I mean, technically it is, but it's not going to be useful. Well, we're coming up on the end of our recorded session. So maybe as a last question, is Cruise hiring? Is your team hiring? What types of roles are you looking for right now?
Yes, we're all hiring. The whole Silicon Valley is hiring. Work from home can be perceived as a monster because people don't want to come back to the office. Yes, hardware still requires to be in. We hire, to be more specific, we hire RAL engineers, we hire test engineers. That's more for me as being a part of that group, my ego part. But we also hire double E's for our development groups, also MEs for our development groups. There is something that is always underappreciated, like the thermal performance. So things get hot and they need to stay cool. That is a non-trivial problem. It's not the problem that you hear about in iPhone presentations, but we hire there. So it's a cool place to go to work. You work on big products. You can fix them sometimes with a hammer, what is pretty cool. But it's a full plan. The problems will stay with you. That's what I'm saying. They don't go away. If you stay with the company, the problem might come back for you. So.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maik, for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining us for the recorded part of this Change Notice video podcast session. And we will transition now to our off the record Q&A, which you have to join us live to be part of.
Manufacturing is changing, and keeping programs agile and on schedule is harder than ever. Leading engineering teams rely on Instrumental to find issues earlier, fix them faster, and make sure they don't come back. Experience the first manufacturing optimization platform designed to enable continuous improvement of your process, from development through production, by unifying your data so your teams can make decisions faster. Instrumental makes finding correlations in product data easy, so your engineers can spend less time wrangling data across email, spreadsheets, and internal systems, and more time solving problems. It's simple. We put the right data in front of the right people in real time. Instrumental aggregates images of every unit at key assembly stages, parametric test data, and measurements in real time in a secure, managed cloud. When installed across factories in a supply chain, brands and suppliers are able to work together to solve their most complex issues. From your first build, Instrumental's Discover AI proactively identifies new issues by scanning your products for anomalies and automatically delivering a daily queue of issues. Engineers can jumpstart failure analysis with defects in context. Engineers leverage a rich, remote dataset to quickly identify correlations and potential root causes, and can push live tests to validate solutions immediately. They use Instrumental to eliminate issues at the source and make sure they don't come back. With complete build and issue analytics for the entire team, program leads can kickstart daily stand-ups, streamline executive reporting, and communicate seamlessly with global teams. Instrumental has helped leading engineering and operations teams move faster, improve yield, and build better products from proto through production. Better products start with better data. Better products start with Instrumental. Schedule a demo today.